Hurry up and wait. Mayor, we are now live.
Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome everyone to the special meeting of the City Council and Successor Agency. We are meeting remotely, as you can see, as required by the pandemic. This is our meeting of September 14th. We are a little bit late. I apologize for getting started. We've just come from a closed session where we took up items A and C. We did not take any reportable action on either one of those items. We did not take item B up, and we did not complete work on item C. With that, I would ask the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Gordo?
Here.
Councilmember Kennedy?
Here.
Councilmember Madison?
Here.
Councilmember Masuda?
Here.
Councilmember McAustin?
Here.
Councilmember Wilson?
Here.
Vice Mayor Hampton?
Blessed to be here.
Mayor Tornick?
Here.
There's a quorum of the council present.
Thank you. I would ask Councilmember Masuda to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please stand.
Rise.
Place your right hand on your heart. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We have a couple of ceremonial matters. We welcome today a new Sergeant of Arms who is at least temporarily keeping order in the council chamber without us in it. We'd like to welcome Sergeant Tom Blanchard and extend thanks to Sergeant Monica Cuellar for service as the past Sergeant of Arms. Sergeant Blanchard has been a member of the Pasadena Police Department for 18 years and has worked a variety of assignments, including patrol, traffic, detectives, and audits and inspections. He has recently been promoted to police sergeant and is currently assigned to patrol. His most rewarding assignment has been working as a field training officer. In this role, he trained and developed new police officers and encouraged them to always be respectful, strive to make a difference, and embrace the entire Pasadena community. Sergeant Blanchard takes pride in working for the Pasadena PD, serving those who live, work, or visit the city of Pasadena, and looks forward to working with us as Sergeant at Arms. He holds a bachelor's degree in Administration of Justice from Union Institute and a master's degree in Organizational Leadership from Woodbury University. During his spare time, Sergeant Blanchard enjoys spending time with his family. So we welcome Sergeant Blanchard, and again, thank you to Sergeant Monica Cuellar for her service as the immediate past Sergeant at Arms. Sergeant Blanchard, welcome.
Thank you, sir.
We have, thank you very much. We have one proclamation. This is for Latino Heritage Month. Typically, we would have a situation with a bunch of announcements about events celebrating Latino Heritage Month. That's unfortunately not the case in our topsy-turvy world this year, but we want to make sure that the recognition does not slip away from us. So we have a proclamation that says, whereas Latino culture constitutes the foundation of the history of the state of California and the Southwest region of the United States, and Latin Americans are justly proud of their rich and diverse cultural heritage, having made positive contributions to the social, artistic, linguistic, and intellectual aspects of our society. And whereas generations of proud, hardworking, enterprising Latin Americans have contributed to and have strengthened our communities with countless achievements and their abiding values in home and family. And whereas Latinos increasingly impact the political, economic, and social growth of our community and state and constitute approximately 35% of the city's total population and approximately 39% statewide. And whereas as we observe Latino Heritage Month, The city encourages all members of our community to recognize the accomplishments and contributions of Latinos in our community and the importance of social justice and fair representation for the Latino community in all aspects of city life and experience. Now, therefore, I, Terry Tornick, Mayor of the City of Pasadena, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim September 15th through October 15, 2020 as Latino Heritage Month. So happily, we don't have the typical array of great events that we would expect, but we still have the recognition, and it's very important for all of us to be aware of that. I want to turn to the city manager for a moment with regard to updating the community with regard to the fire issue, the Bobcat fire. Mr. Manager?
Before you go to the city manager, I did want to ask a question because of the proclamation you just read about Latino Heritage Month. There is typically, like you said, there is an array of things that happen throughout our city. Are we planning on, and this would be for the city manager, is there a plan for some sort of display in front of the city hall, or a week that people could drive past, or is there some way to celebrate Latino Heritage Month that is responsible when it comes to social distancing? And I think, a proclamation is great, but something visual would be really nice, because we have such a great Latino culture here in the city of Pasadena. So something in front of City Hall, I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud right now, but city manager, I was wondering if you would talk to Parks and Rec staff about what we can do to visualize this.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Mayor. I'm not aware of any alternate plans, but I'll consult with Brenda Harvey-Williams to see if there are any efforts underway to make sure that we still can commemorate this important month, given the circumstances that we're in.
Thank you.
Mr. Gordo.
I think that's a terrific idea. Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. I also, it is unfortunate that usually we have your parade, and last year's parade was, I believe, the best ever. I had the good fortune of participating in organizing the very first parade for the first Latino History Parade. I'm not going to say how many years ago, but it was a long time ago, I think more than 20 years ago. And I'll say that it's unfortunate we can't have that event, but I think as Mr. Hampton points out, there are other ways that we can remind people about the rich culture and history right here in our city of Pasadena. And I'd ask that the library maybe think of a reading program, or highlight any movies or documentaries that may be available to the public as part of a public effort to just raise awareness and recognize the important contributions of everyone who is in our community. And this is just one month where we bring some focus to Latino history and contributions. But that should be an ongoing effort. Because, yes, this is Latino Heritage Month, but this is such a diverse community that we should make a public effort through our library to constantly celebrate all of the diversity in Pasadena. And so I put that as a challenge to the city manager, starting with Latino Heritage Month, and then building for every heritage that makes up our great community.
Mayor?
Yes.
Just very quickly, like Councilmember and Vice Mayor Hampton and Councilmember Gordo, I'd just like to reiterate, support what all of them have said, including the proclamation that the mayor has shared with the community. Two quick issues of note, particularly important from people who come from humble beginnings like my own, and that is Pasadena City College and Pacific Oaks College just recently received grants from the federal government into the multi-million, very low multi-million, to attract, retain, and ensure the success of Latinos in both of those institutions. That information is on my website. Certainly, I believe all of the council speaks for itself, but it's happy that such is the case. And I want to add my voice in just saying to my constituents directly, but really the whole city, we are all a part of Latino heritage. It makes us stronger, warmer as a city. And thank you for the opportunity, Mayor.
Very good. Thank you for your comments. I think those are great suggestions, and I'm sure the city manager will follow through. Now I'm going to ask him to update us quickly on the fire circumstance.
Thank you, Mayor, council members, and members of the public. The Pasadena Fire Department personnel are currently leading 2 strike teams on the Bobcat fire. Overnight and through this morning, the fire continued its slow progress in a northwest direction. An evacuation order was issued for portions of Arcadia and Sierra Madre yesterday, but firefighters have been able to maintain the fire lines and keep the fire out of communities. Currently, the fire is a little bit more than 36,000 acres, about 6% contained. The inversion layer is lifted, so it's more likely that people will see the tips of some of the large flames, but the wind conditions remain favorable. With the current behavior of the fire, there remains no imminent threat to Pasadena. However, an evacuation warning remains in effect for residents in our foothill neighborhoods, primarily the Upper Hastings Ranch area, as a precaution. Evacuation warning means that residents should be prepared and have a plan in place if conditions warrant voluntary or mandatory evacuations. If evacuations are required, we have several different means of communication to let people know that they need to leave. Some of these are high technology, like our Please and our Nixle system. We also have public address systems. We would do door-to-door notification, media notification, and the city's website. We've been posting updates daily on our website and several postings a day on our social media. We've been disseminating reports out to the council offices and are in constant communication with our media partners. We're highlighting both the fire and the air quality safety messages in coordination with other affected cities. We're reminding residents to sign up for emergency notifications through the Pasadena Local Emergency Alert System. You could do this by visiting the fire department webpage on the city's website. You'll receive voice, email, or text emergency notifications should such be necessary. A reminder, this system is only used for imminent danger, and it doesn't provide updates the type that you'll get by looking at our website. It's truly an emergency notification system. We also recommend that people register with LA County's Alert County Mass Notification System. And we'll continue to provide updates as the situation evolves. We have staff participating in the Forest Service virtual meeting later this afternoon. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Manager. I know all of us have received communications from constituents of concern, and the announcements that have happened with regard to being aware and alert have been misinterpreted by some as warnings to evacuate, and it's given everyone's current frame of mind. I think it's understandable that people would be very apprehensive. I do urge, as the city manager said, everyone who can to sign up for the Please system, PLEAS, the notification system, and they can do that, as he said, on the fire department portion of the city website. So if there is an emergency, you will be notified. And part of what started the concern was that the county's notification system really impacted a large number of neighbors north of the freeway, went quite far west. The notification went quite far west, and people got quite agitated about it. And I'm sure all of my colleagues have had phone calls and people packing their bags. So We are not in any imminent danger, but it is good to stay situationally aware. And if there was ever a reason not to be out and about unless necessary, the air quality would be, apart from the whole pandemic trying to keep people close to home, the air quality has been of a nature to also reinforce that. So we'll keep you up to date. The city has been active on social media accounts, and will continue to alert people. But if there is a true emergency and a need to evacuate all of those systems, please, a Nixle and the county system, and if it comes down to it, knocking on doors will be employed to make sure that people are notified. So there's no reason to panic or to have your motor running in your driveway, but we do need to all stay alert. And our best wishes go out to the firefighters. We have 2 strike teams deployed on the Bobcat fire, keeping us safe. And of course, what is in some danger is the facilities on Mount Wilson. And those of you that have gotten the emails from Mount Wilson know that they have provided additional fire protection and reservoirs and high volume hydrants in preparation for this kind of event. But the circumstances up there are somewhat fraught. And there's more danger up there than there is down in Pasadena neighborhoods. So when we close our meeting today, in addition to asking you all to have your best thoughts and prayers for the victims of COVID, we're going to extend those thoughts and prayers to people who are suffering and endangered, and the first responders, the firefighters who are dealing with this terrible fire condition throughout the state of California, and also the victims of this rush of violence that we've had, that Councilmember Kennedy has referenced, these terrible shooting incidents that we've had in our city that have involved even very young people, and we think innocent people. This is a tremendous concern. We're asking everyone to do what they can to try to keep people safe, to mitigate violence, to argue against violence, and urge people to remain calm. And our thoughts and prayers go out to the victims of these shootings. We are relying on our clergy and parents to talk to young people and others about not engaging in dangerous activity. And our police department is working overtime to try to keep all of us safe. And so when we close our meeting, we've got a lot to pray for and to think about. And I'm hopeful that Pasadena will be equal to the challenge, in spite of the fact that we're all very stressed at this point by the combination of the pandemic and street violence and other kinds of circumstances. We really need to be mindful and take care of each other. Are there any comments or suggestions with regard to that, Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. I was going to ask the same thing to adjourn the meeting, and positive prayers and thoughts for the families of these young people that have been shot over the weekend. I'm constantly praying for them. And last night when I got that text message, it was just extremely sad. I do want to let the residents know, those throughout the city of Pasadena, I know our police department is working extremely hard to catch these individuals that are involved in this shooting, this senseless violence that is occurring. And I support our police department with all measures that they need to do to catch these individuals. And I continuously will keep these young people in prayer. That's just so young, 14 and 18 years old. I mean, senseless. It shouldn't happen like this. But I talking about the fires, also to our first responders that are out there on the line, praying for them as well. But to the fires, I did want to ask the city manager, who would be fine. Once again, I like to appreciate all of the updates that the fire department gives us. It's very helpful to keep the residents informed. If the health department would write anything about the quality of the air, they would send out anything to to the residents. I've been looking up things on the CDC and different organizations about smoke inhalation. I just didn't know if Pasadena Health Department had, any facts that they could send out as part of the press release with our fire department, city manager.
Vice Mayor, generally the health department doesn't get involved with air quality. That's the AQMD. And so we can include that information in pertinent releases.
Yeah, we should do that. Good suggestion. Mr. Gordo.
Thank you.
I want to recognize the awful shootings that occurred. And, I won't repeat what has already been said, other than we should redouble our efforts to prevent them. And as the Vice Mayor said, support our police department and police officers who are out there. It's a tough job, and it's been made all the tougher. I think we should also recognize the very, very heinous crime upon police officers in Compton that occurred over the weekend. Here we have a violent act in our own community against young people that should absolutely be rejected, recognized, and we should encourage and support our police department as they attempt to find whoever committed that crime. And at the same time, also recognize that, two innocent police officers sitting in a police vehicle were fired upon very directly. And I think we should join with the County of Los Angeles and every police officer and ask for peace for the two minors who were shot, for everyone who's been shot in our community or had violence perpetrated upon them, including police officers who were innocently sitting in the police vehicle. That's wrong, and we should add our voice as a city to say that is wrong. What happened over the weekend?
Thank you, Mr. Gordo. Mr. Kennedy.
I want to be brief because my colleagues have been on point. My heart is heavy that some coward would wound, and hopefully the 18-year-old and the 14-year-old will recover. Thank God for our police department. Thank God that they're on the case and seeking to find the individual or individuals who did this. It's reprehensible. It must stop. Additionally, as the community demands from its elected officials, we request from our community to be eyes and ears, especially now, that people would engage in this type of behavior during a pandemic. It's hurtful, it's painful. All of my colleagues, or almost all of my colleagues, either have children or grandchildren, or a relative have children that are like their own. And this is extremely painful. And we must come together as a community to stop it. Recently, within the last couple of days, our police department got another gun where someone was brandishing a weapon in the air. I mean, come on, folks. This is not Pasadena. And this is not the world we want to have in Pasadena. We must come together as a community and tell those who are engaged in this type of behavior, not acceptable. Not acceptable in Pasadena, but not acceptable anywhere. I have a nephew who's a police officer in Inglewood. I have a nephew who's in the thick of it in Seattle with all kinds of projectiles thrown at him. This is unacceptable. This is unacceptable anywhere. And hopefully, Mayor Tornick and my colleagues, we are all on the same page and standing up, unified, without politics, as a community, and doing everything we can to come together. We must do that. We must do that. We just must do that. And it's beyond just praying together. We must come together and build a better way, because this way is deadly that we're witnessing. Easily, the young man who had the weapon, that could have been another officer involved shooting. But thank God our officers de-escalated and that the suspect de-escalated. So yes, we need prayer, but we also need all of us coming together as one Pasadena community. Thank you for indulging me.
All right. Thank you all for your heartfelt, Mr. Masuda.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, colleagues, for all your comments regarding the violence that we recently had. Mayor, my field rep, Noreen, just told me about Please. It's not working in Pasadena right now because we've been getting a lot of complaints. They've been getting the notices on Nixle. So can we get that corrected somehow?
Yeah.
Hey, Councilmember Masuda, we would use the Please system if there was a need to tell people to evacuate. So it's not that it's not working. It just hasn't been activated because there is no evacuation order.
Okay, then can we?
Thanks for the opportunity to clarify that.
So can we put the word out, Steve, about Nixle so then that they can get the recent reports on the fires?
Yes, I'll ask Lisa Dedarian, who I know is listening, to put information out on our social media, how people can sign up for Nixle so they can get more frequent updates.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Gene. Please is really when it's time to go, but it does not give the kind of informational updates that some people are looking for.
Thank you.
All right, before we move to the consent calendar, I want to alert everyone that item 18, with regard to the YWCA, is not going to be on the agenda this evening. So that anybody who's interested in that item, the resolution with regard to the YWCA property, that item has been removed from the agenda. So you don't, if you're here for that, you don't need to wait around. Okay, so we're going to move now to the consent calendar. Are there items that council members would like, Vice Mayor?
Mayor, I would also note we have public comment on item 8 and on item 17 of the consent.
Okay. Vice Mayor?
Item 7 and item 9.
7 and 9. And then Andy, Mr.
13, please, Mayor.
13. Okay, so we've got items 7, 8, 9, 13, and 17.
Move approval.
Sweet motion for the balance. I'm sorry, Mr. Gordo?
You make a comment on the Arts and Culture Relief Fund, but I can wait. I'm happy to move it forward, but I just have a quick comment and a suggestion.
Okay.
Maybe we should just hold it.
All right, so what number is that, Victor? I'm sorry.
11.
11.
What number was that? Sorry? 11.
11.
And then Mayor, also on item number 10, before you make that motion, there was a correction made to the attachment. Well, actually, the attachment to the resolution is correct. And that's the resolution that's being adopted by the action. The attachment to the staff report had a couple of minor errors, but the actual resolution, the attachment to the resolution is correct for item 10.
Again, I move approval, Mayor.
So Mr. Kennedy has made a sweet motion, including the corrected item 10.
Second.
I'm sorry?
Madison.
Second.
Second by Mr. Madison. Sorry, Steve. Second by Mr. Madison. I heard a voice, but I didn't see it. Clerk will call the roll.
So to approve consent items except for 7, 8, 9, 11, 13, and 17. Councilmember Gordo?
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy?
Yes.
Councilmember Madison?
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda?
Yes.
Councilmember McAustin?
Yes.
Councilmember Wilson?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hampton?
Yes.
Mayor Tornick?
Yes.
That motion is approved without opposition.
All right, we'll move to item 7. Vice Mayor?
I had a quick question, and just something for the city attorney to look at. The roll call vote, I've been watching other city councils, not that I want to watch other city. And I noticed that they're not doing a roll call vote. They're either, putting their hands up, or if they're not, or if they don't want to vote on it, they say, I'm voting against it. I think the roll call vote actually adds a lot of time to play clock. So, to our city attorney, if you could research that a little bit, it'd be helpful. I think just for the flow of the meeting. Number 7, I had a couple questions because I reached out to some local landscaping companies, and they were aware. So I have to say that I'm very grateful for the department to making sure that they got Pasadena businesses involved. They were aware of this proposal. A lot of companies that I spoke to, and some that are on this list, did not apply because they believed that Pasadena was already going to give it to the organization that won the bid in the first place. I did have a question about the whole entire, not necessarily this contract, but on the idea of this. It's very interesting to me that we have a company that comes and cuts a tree, and then another company that comes out to remove the roots. It seems very backwards. I think the company that removes the tree should also remove the roots. And so maybe we should look at whoever's doing our tree removal and ask them to remove the roots, because what I've seen across my district and even across the city of Pasadena is we have these trees that are removed and their stumps are there for months. And these stumps, and sometimes in some places, are on very busy streets where it could be a liability. I don't know if anyone's tripped over any stumps anytime, or anything like that, but I just see it kind of as a liability, and it's an eyesore to the fact that we're now waiting for months for having another company come out to remove the roots. To me, it's just, the process is kind of weird.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Hampton. If I'm allowed to, yes, let me respond to your questions. You had a great question, and that's why this item joined the removal of the tree, the cutting of the tree, and the removal of stump as one contract. In the past, that was the process that the city had, or the culture was to remove trees because it's easier to remove trees. And then for removal of the stumps, we have to call USA, which is underground utilities that have to come and mark it. So when they start removing the stump, they don't cut any utilities. Specifically, all the street lights are within the back of the curb, the conduits. So we have to be very careful when we remove stumps that we don't cut street lights or high voltage electrical wires and so forth there in the ground. But this contract specifically does that. We are asking the contractor to remove the tree, and then after the USA is done, they'll remove the stump. There is another process that happens that it's not evident to the public. When there are emergency removals, let's say there's a tree that is falling or it's in verge of falling or has fallen, our crews go out there, our forestry crews go out there under the supervision of Kenny James, and they remove the tree. And that's why we used to wait for the other contractor to come and remove those stumps. So hopefully this has streamlined the process, and we appreciate your observation. It was the same observation I had, and therefore this contract will have two processes handled at the same time.
Thank you. So we don't have in-house a stump removal?
We do have in-house equipment to remove stumps, but we feel it's more efficient that we assign contractors to do the work, and our crews can be more focused on maintaining emergency pruning and emergency work on our trees.
Okay, and this contract is for 5 years?
It's 3 years with options to extend 2 more years, yes.
And for the option, does the option come back to the full city council, or that is staff? That is normally staff, right?
It is, the way the agenda is written, it gives authority to city manager to extend the contract, as we have done with all the other agendas when it comes before the city council. City council authorizes the city manager to extend the contracts.
So, so it gives the city manager the authority to extend the contract automatically.
Correct.
Without. So I would approve this contract with the caveat that in 3 years this will come back to the council for the extension. And I know that's not typical of how we do business, but I think that it could give an opportunity for a local business by that time to apply for this as well. And if they decide, that they're not going to go after this this type of work, then then we're able to continue with the contract as awarded.
Is there a second? Ms. Kennedy?
I'll second the motion, but I have a question.
All right.
I'd like to ask staff, how does what the council is voting on now interplay with the fact that we are rebidding the tree contract that was presented, I believe, to council several months back? Where are we in that process, and what's the thinking why those two contracts are not combined into one?
Councilmember Kennedy, I'm trying to recall, we do have a contract for tree trimming already in place. We were not bidding that. We rejected bids for tree watering. Maybe you're alluding to that one.
No.
Could it be Water and Powers?
No. Speaking directly to the city manager, I was informed that the contractor that was being recommended by staff, that contract was in fact full and it would be rebid for a lot of reasons. Chief amongst them is that those who chose to bid or even chose not to bid were presented a number of changes during the process, which confused the process. So the manager is the one who informed me, Mr. Maloyan. So I think it's apropos that the manager responds to provide greater clarity.
Hey, Councilmember Kennedy, I believe that the contract that's in front of the council now may in fact be that subject contract from a couple of months back. I see the number 2 bidder was one that had raised some questions. There were 3 addendums issued to the prior bid that we never went forward on. I would ask Mr. Maloyan and his staff if he recalls that this is sort of the successor bid to that. I see. So the answer is yes. Staff's confirmed. Councilmember Kennedy, this is in fact the rebid from the contract that we rejected all bids previously.
I was under the impression that the contract was of a higher value, so that's why I didn't recognize it as such. So I provided the second that the mayor requested.
All right, is there further discussion on item 7? We'll have a roll call.
Okay. It's a approved staff recommendation amended to limit the contract for a 3-year term with no extensions available.
Well, I think the extension has to come back to the council.
Right. In essence, it has to be reapproved by the city council. So there wouldn't be an extension by the city manager. Councilmember Gordo?
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy?
Yes.
Councilmember Madison?
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda?
Yes.
Councilmember McAustin?
Yes.
Councilmember Wilson? Was that a yes?
I'm sorry, yes.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Hampton?
Yes.
Mayor Tornick?
Yes.
Motion is approved without opposition.
All right, we'll move to item 8. I think there's a public comment on number 8.
There is, Mayor. It's from William Paparian. City staff is asking you to approve a $2 million expenditure over the next 3 years for services that can be readily performed, which by their own admission in the staff report can be done in-house. Reject this recommendation so that city staff can learn to stop spending money like a drunken sailor on shore leave. Over the next 3 years, Pasadena is facing increasingly diminished revenues. Time to start acting more fiscally responsible. That completes public comment on this item, Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any questions of staff?
I would like to know, is there any value from a former colleague, maybe for two of you on the council, on the question that he raises? If in fact what he says is accurate, I think there needs to be some public discourse related to answering the question.
Yeah, Mr. Kennedy, if it pleases the council, I'd like to turn it over to Gachar Mbawa to explain. I know that the Water and Power Department is careful in deciding whether to hire outside consultants to assist with work or manage something in-house. And given that it's his birthday, maybe we can wish him a happy birthday and allow Mr. Mbawa to explain the decision-making behind this contract, if that's acceptable.
Okay.
Should we sing happy birthday to him?
No, we'll hold that. Mr. Bawa?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. This construction management and inspection service is on call as needed, and it depends on the volume and the complexity of the work. So we do intend to maximize utilization of our own workforce, but there could be some projects that we are anticipating, such as Sunset Reservoir construction, which we haven't done in a long, long time. I think none of the present employees can remember having done that type of a project. Treatment systems of different kinds on the water would be another area which is something where the expertise is limited in-house. Now, time to time, the main replacements can be large in volume in different locations, and we could be short on our resources. But the bottom line is this is only in addition to our staff when we cannot either manage the volume or the expertise that's needed to do the work. So the money would be spent judiciously.
Thank you, Mr. Bawa. Mr. Kennedy?
Given the staff's report on page, well, there's no page number on this one. Why isn't there any page? Oh, 3 of 4. Since 2002, the city has awarded DUDEC 28 contracts collectively valued at approximately $4 million and some change, 6 of which are currently active. No prior contracts with Wallace. Does our auditing person in the city manager's office customarily do a sampling of these contracts where we have repeatedly provided an award to the same entity? Is that part of our protocols just to sure up that everything is copacetic?
Councilmember Kennedy, first of all, I'd point out that DUDEC is a local Pasadena firm. And then beyond that, I would say that as far as our risk audit group has been concerned, as of yet, they have focused on higher risk factors than reviewing repeat contractors. It is something potentially that could be viewed, could be added to the work program to ensure that contract awards are fair and we're not providing any favoritism. The scoring is included as a table in the staff report. There are cases where professional consulting firms do seem to do a lot of business with the city over the years, in large measure because of their expertise. In this case with DUDEC, I'd like to point out that it's great to have such a qualified firm here locally.
One last question. Thank you for your response. Steve, is this entity the entity that also conducts the water review, meaning the quality of our water in the city of Pasadena as well?
Not this company.
No. Okay, thank you.
Did have a,
Mr. Gordo.
you know, this is an area, and I think it's the point of the speaker is to, as I interpret it, is to ask the question, or do we need these outside services? I hear Bawa's response, but one of the issues that's come up previously in the context, for example, of the planning department and, you know, these long ongoing contracts that we've had in the planning department in the past, to provide services that maybe could be provided by city staff. And I do think that at some point we have to look at our contracting process and how we make the decisions to outsource some of these services and whether it's the most efficient and effective use of the city's resources. In the planning context, I think we've discovered that it may not be. But I think all of these areas are ripe to be looked at for the reasons Mr. Kennedy raises, to ensure that some of these long-term contracts, that caught my eye as well, Mr. Kennedy, the number of contracts that have been awarded. I'd be interested to know, you know, these are up to contracts. What were the actual expenditures of the up to contracts? Did we exhaust the amounts in those contracts? Is it likely we're going to exhaust the amount, up to amount in these contracts? And could we provide a even better level of service were we to provide the services in-house? Those are all questions that I think we need to explore in every area that we contract in. And so I think that's the challenge for the department and for the city manager, and for the council going forward, to review all of our processes, to review the determinations that have been made historically, and whether in fact there's sufficient transparency, as Mr. Kennedy raises, or whether it's the most cost-effective and efficient way of conducting the city's business. And I think we ought to undertake that challenge going forward.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gordo. Further questions, or is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right. Clerk will call the roll.
Councilmember Gordo? Yes? Sorry. Thank you. Councilmember Kennedy?
Yes.
Councilmember Madison?
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda?
Yes.
Councilmember McAustin? Sorry, Margaret, you might have been on mute. Yes, she said. Councilmember Wilson? Thank you. Councilmember Wilson? Thank you. Vice Mayor Hampton?
Yes.
Mayor Tornick?
Yes.
Motion is approved without opposition.
Mayor, if I may, I'm going to suggest that the suggestions that have been made, the city manager report back to us. You know, some cities conduct what's called a cost benefit analysis as it relates to contracts, and there has to be an actual finding on large contracts like this as part of the staff report. And I'd like the city manager and his staff to consider what it would take when we have long-term contracts, you know, of such large amount, to conduct an analysis in the staff report for the public to see, not just a rationale for you know, well, we may need the extra help and we want the money appropriated so that we can spend it. But I think there has to be a thorough analysis so that the council has comfort and the public has comfort that there's been some real thinking behind why we're not doing, why this contract is the most efficient and effective, and why the work isn't being done in-house. A lot of cities in California do that analysis as part of their contracting process. And I think we ought to look at that process carefully here in Pasadena.
Okay, I think that's a useful suggestion. Thank you, Mr. Gordo. Mr. Mermel, are you mindful of that? You've heard that comment, and can you give us some assurance in that regard?
Oh, I heard it, and I'll give it some consideration and discuss it with the staff.
Thank you. We'll move to item 9. Mr. Hampton, Vice Mayor.
Restart.
Yes, so I'm supportive of this, and so I would motion to move approval of this. The reason I bring it up, this is pretty much just technology from my understanding. Is that correct, Mr. City Manager? And hardware?
In a word, yes, and Philip Leclerc is here if you want a little more additional information.
No, the reason why I asked for this to be brought up, and the reason why I asked, because it's on the agenda, you can only talk about things that are on the agenda. This is a security firm. We've hired other security firms to lock our parks and things of that nature. We've also requested that, or at least some people have requested from the community, that more of our police officers are hired locally. And so I'm asking this of the chair of the Public Safety Committee to have a discussion about some of the security firms that we have here and creating a program that would create a local hire pool for our police officers. I think it's a great opportunity for young people within our community to go out and do security jobs and work without a weapon. In most cases, they're unarmed security agents, but they have gotten all the background checks, that there could be some sort of hiring pool with our police department and the security guards that are working our community. At the same time, our security companies could be hiring people locally to do some of those security jobs. So I would like for this discussion to be in public safety. Long story short, that's what I was trying to get out of mentioning today.
I think the spirit and content of what Mr. Hampton is suggesting is further consideration, because at the heart of it, it helps our young people get on the right path, stay on the right path, and there may be an opportunity for them to be a policeman or police person or a fire person. So yes, we'll take this up. I would ask that the city manager make note of that for further discussion. And thank you very much, Vice Mayor, for bringing this to our attention.
Thank you. I'd like to move approval of this item.
Is there a second? Second by Mr. Gordo. Clerk, call the roll.
Councilmember Gordo,
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy,
Yes.
Councilmember Madison,
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda,
Yes.
Councilmember McAustin,
Yes.
Councilmember Wilson,
Yes.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hampton,
Yes.
Mayor Tornick.
Yes.
Motion is approved without opposition.
Thank you. We'll move to item 11. Mr. Gordo.
So I'll make this quick. I support it and I'm prepared to move it, but I do think this is an opportunity to challenge the philanthropic community to match these dollars. I am aware, for example, of at least one individual who is willing to match contributions from the private sector in a pretty high number. I would say to you, $50,000 to $100,000 if members of the public or members of people in philanthropy are willing to do that. And so I'm going to ask that we go forward with this, but that we bring to EdTech the possibility of adding a challenge to people to match these dollars and potentially another direct contribution from an individual family in Pasadena.
Great.
So this is Michelle Bonarise. I understand that this has already gone to one council subcommittee.
We went for the appropriation, but I'm talking about the programmatic aspect of the challenge that would bolster this.
The programmatic aspect?
Yeah, the challenge piece of it.
Okay, we'll see if we'd have to look at the extent to which we can do that.
All right, Mr. Wilson and then Ms. McAustin.
Yes, I appreciate Councilmember Gorder bringing up that idea. We did do something similar with the small business grants.
Right.
We did allocate $250,000 of challenge match. I think we only had $50,000 of matching. So in some ways, there's matching dollars unless I know it's all fungible. But I think that maybe we'll get more success in the cultural area for people to support these not-for-profits. So I'm supportive of figuring out how, if we can do that. I think it's great opportunity to a lot of people who traditionally support the arts to do so in a new way. So hopefully that suggestion can move forward.
And as soon as the family that is prepared to put some challenge money up, is willing to make themselves known to the staff and others, then I'll provide the name of the city manager so we can work with them.
Yeah, we should be able to find a way to help people make these contributions. I'm sure we can work that through.
Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Bob.
I think that's already come up when this concept came up earlier in discussion. Steve, I don't know if you or Rochelle want to address this, but we did already receive an offer, Victor, from an individual in Pasadena who is willing to match philanthropic contributions of others. It's my understanding, I wasn't at that finance committee meeting, but I was a proponent of this program from the beginning, that Rochelle told me they would work with staff to find a way to expand it to allow for contributions. That was my understanding, that was already in place. But Steve, maybe you could respond to that. Steve?
Sure. Well, certainly anybody who, by way of this action, assuming council approval, the city council is putting forward the money for these grants. And so obviously any private person who wishes to match it and perhaps challenge others, we are certainly already in a position to accept those contributions. I would ask Rochelle if she had anything more to add to that, but we're certainly equipped to take any private sector philanthropic donations that people want to add to this pot to help our art and culture organizations in the city.
Good evening, Mayor, afternoon, Mayor and council members, staff. My understanding is that an individual has contacted us offering to provide the last leg, well, so to speak, of a $500,000 grant. So the amount is set more at $100,000 level, which would mean another $400,000 would need to be raised as the part of the challenge. I have spoken with Jennifer Duvall at the Pasadena Community Foundation, and we've had several conversations. Certainly any funds, she has said she is willing to consider creating an aggregate of private funds, and those funds could certainly be added to the effort that we here at the city have proposed to you.
Rochelle, I'll and city manager, I'll share the information that I'm in touch with the family directly, and I'll share the information that maybe there are two people, two families.
The more the merrier.
So I'll tell you guys.
Thank you, Mr. Gordo. So we have do we have a motion? Yeah, Mr. Gordo made the motion, I think. Is there a second?
That's correct.
Second.
There we go. We have a second now.
Second by Mr. Wilson. Please call the roll.
I heard Ms. McAustin, Mayor.
Okay, Mr. McAustin, fine.
Councilmember Gordo?
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy?
Yes.
Councilmember Madison?
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda?
Yes.
Councilmember McAustin?
Yes.
Councilmember Wilson?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hampton?
Yes.
Mayor Tornick?
Yes.
Motion is approved without opposition.
Thank you.
Mayor?
Thank you.
Yes.
Earlier, I had planned to mention something about the overdoses that have taken place in our community. And from a public safety standpoint, for anyone who is watching there's someone selling a controlled substance in our community that is actually causing death. And without alluding to a person who uses or does not, I would say that our community, the whole community, needs to be extremely careful. We've had 7 overdoses at least, there may be more, and at least 3 deaths, and I believe 1 person may be on life support. So as a community, we need to be vigilant and share with our law enforcement personnel any information that you may have related to these overdoses, and admonishing family and friends, etc., what is actually occurring right now. It just seems like one negative situation after the other, and we're all asking for relief. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Number 13, Mr. Wilson.
Yes, Mayor, I can ask questions if that's easiest. This is on the residential impact fee nexus study. So maybe I'll just ask questions. Reading the staff report, I see the recommendation, even though the nexus study does suggest there's opportunity for potentially a significant increase. I did notice, by the way, on the staff report, page 3, the headings were missing in the columns. I assume the left column is current and the right column is what the new nexus study would permit. Is that correct?
That is correct, Councilmember Wilson. For some reason, that didn't copy well. I think the background is gray. We'll make sure that doesn't happen again, but you're correct. The first column is the current fees. The proposed, based on this report, would have been the fees if you chose to increase them.
Can I ask I mean, I understand the recommendation, but could someone walk the narrative as to, I'm not suggesting we should increase them, but what the analysis and what the thinking was that we don't increase them?
We're being consistent with the rest of actions taken by the city. We're not increasing any fees. We haven't increased any of the CPI items this year due to the COVID. That's the reasoning behind it. We didn't want to be inconsistent with all the other actions that the city council has taken as of today in regards to the fees. I just want to mention that this study allows the city council at any time to increase the fees up to amount given. So you have plenty of time to contemplate, look into the economic situation of the city, and at appropriate time increase the fees if you wish to do so. This was staff's recommendation not to increase, being consistent with every other action we have taken this year.
And Mr. Wilson, I would also say from the Finance Committee's discussion that we're pretty much at top of the market now. I think
that was my assumption when you look at the chart.
That's correct. We really don't want to surge ahead of all the other communities in the market basket, and so we felt the combination of what Mr. Maloyan referenced in terms of our overall outlook with regard to fee increases, and the fact that we're kind of at the top of the heap already, and what Mr. Maloyan said, that this doesn't preclude us from raising fees in the future. The Nexus study is not that perishable. So we would have the opportunity to reconsider this at a later date. And so it made sense to retain the existing fee structure.
Because I understand the Nexus study needs to be refreshed every 5 years, but it's not like we have one bite of the apple every 5 years. We can at any time. Okay, I missed that subtlety. Certainly I wouldn't recommend an increase now. I was wondering, also reading the detailed analysis, Mr. Maloyan, what is the balance in the residential impact fee fund?
Thank you for asking that question, Councilmember Wilson. The balance for the West District is $643,491.
Sorry,
for the West District, there are 3 residential impact districts.
What is the total amount? I don't need to fight it.
Oh, the total is 6.2 million.
Oh, why did I see, okay. I thought I saw somewhere in this detailed nexus study on page 16, it said the fund reported a positive balance of $23 million as of June 30th, 2019.
So there are two things happening at the moment. When I gave you the $6.2 million balance, that was as of June 30th, 2020. This is the latest. And since the study has been done, there has been appropriations and also permit issued that they have paid into residential impact fees. I can ask Ms. Hollowell if that number was the total number used. Yeah, that was the total dollars used, not the balance.
So, oh, the 22 million, you know, this is the fund reported a positive fund balance of 22.75 million. That wasn't the balance on June 30th?
No, that's dollars allocated and used for park purposes. Appropriated.
Okay, so am I misreading that or is that miswritten?
Can you direct me to the page you're reading, council member?
It's in the Nexus report. It's on the bottom of page 16.
Correct. That council member, that says 22.75 million as of June 30th, 2019. That was
Okay,
the
so
fund
you're
balance
saying-
in 2019.
I understand. So you're suggesting then that wasn't the fund balance, that we've used $16 million of the fund balance in the last year?
Correct. Appropriated.
Okay. And the reason I'm asking is wondering whether the thinking about not increasing the residential impact fee was impacted by what at $22 million would seem to be a very high unappropriated balance. And you're saying that at $6 million, that seems reasonable. I was concerned that we weren't effectively appropriating these funds, but it does sound like we've caught up in the last year. So those are my questions. At the right time, unless there are other questions, I'm prepared to move the staff recommendation.
All right, we'll take that as a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Further questions for staff? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Councilmember Gordo?
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy?
Yes.
Councilmember Madison?
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda?
Yes.
Councilmember McAustin?
Yes.
Councilmember Wilson?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hampton?
Yes.
Mayor Tornick?
Yes,
Motion is approved without opposition.
thank you. Item 17, we have a public comment.
We have 3 public comments, Mayor. We also received 2 letters that were received regarding the claim related to the officer-involved shooting. The first public comment is from Alan Shea. On August 20, 2020, the Pasadena Police Department released the videos of the police shooting of an unarmed black man, Anthony McLean. The videos were the only exclusive and complete account of the facts, an investigatory source to make a conclusion of the conduct of the 2 officers involved in the initial vehicle stop. The officers' allegations made to support the release of the videos as a justified shooting, which resulted in the death of Anthony McLean, was not what was represented in the videos. The conduct of the officers and the representations stated to support a justified shooting were contradicted by the videos. The videos clearly show the officers violated California law AB 392 and department policy for not turning on the body cam. As of Saturday, August 22, 2020, and each day thereafter, I posted frame-by-frame pictures of the officers' violations. I emailed copies to the city manager to be forwarded to city council members with a demand as a Pasadena resident to fire the 2 officers. If the officers are not fired before the date of this hearing, I am requesting that the termination of the officers be agendized on the schedule for September 21, 2020. The next is from Zachary Moldoff. My comment is for City Manager Mermel, who refuses to prioritize Anthony McLean's family and provide justice in this heinous murder. I find it disheartening and suspicious that the person in charge of the Pasadena Police Department feels he needs to deny public comments, public records requests to, quote, protect an officer, end quote. If officers cannot be trained to protect citizens, officers who, quote, fail to turn on, end quote, body cams and shoot to kill, then who are these officers protecting? What are they doing? It's unjust and criminal for people with the freedom to kill to lack the discretion to wound, and it is further criminal and doubly surreptitious for political actors to posture and protect the most reprehensible practitioners of law enforcement while systemically targeting Black people. I'm not afraid of, quote, gangs. I'm afraid of politicians who side with a police force that brazenly disregards the law when it's convenient and uses the slightest infraction, a front license plate, as grounds for murder. A citizen oversight committee of police needs to be made up primarily of people with a criminal record. Otherwise, the committee will have no idea what it's actually like to be a victim of the very system this committee would serve to regulate. And then the last comment is from Olden Denham. My name is Uncle Bubba. I am disappointed that my city leaders are not able to come forth with truth immediately. Instead, Chief Perez chose to make the statement after the release of their own videos that clearly show Anthony McLean did not have a gun or throw a gun. The videos clearly show he had a cell phone and that the officer who shot him saw it in his left hand. I respectfully request, no, I demand a retraction and an apology from Chief John Perez and for the City Council to comply with AB 392. Okay, if you don't understand me, I'm looking for some good, quote, good trouble, end quote, from our city and elected officials in Pasadena. So my big question for the City Council is, why can't you just fire the officers like all the other cities across the country have done after reviewing videos which speaks for themselves? Have you seen the videos released on August 20, 2020 by Pasadena Police Department? That completes the public comments to be read aloud. As I stated, there were two letters that were received related to this matter.
All right. Any comments or questions? Vice Mayor?
I just wanted to mention these comments, very brief, that we're lucky that we only received 3. These comments aren't going to go away. This is not something that just disappears because of fires or anything like that. It's just that this is not on the agenda. I do believe, based on our city policy, that there are policies in place, otherwise policies and laws in place, otherwise we have just complete anarchy. The same way I want to hold people accountable for shooting innocent bystanders, teenagers, is the same way I want to hold accountable for those who are supposed to protect and serve. And so I believe that the officer was out of policy. Of course, there's an investigation. And with that investigation, of course, there should be some sort of, I believe there definitely should be, when you discipline that is enacted. And that discipline, because of the amount of policy violations that I personally saw, and I'm not, once again, in law enforcement, should lead to the termination of one of these officers. And that's just, and I've said that already, and I'm going to continue to say that. But at the same time, in the same token, I want to let people know that, and to our officers that are out there working, people that are out of law need to be equally held accountable, whether it be through a ticket or arrested. So no one should be above the law. And when we are the body that actually is that level of accountability, the city manager is that person that we have hired to do that. And so I'm asking the city manager to do his job and look at what the policies are, and we have to start holding people accountable. And so I'll just leave it at that, but I'm grateful for the people that have constantly brought those comments up. But at the same time, if there are people out there that are doing things that are out of line with the law, they also need to be held accountable. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Is there a motion on item 17?
To receive and file.
To receive and file?
So moved.
Second.
Second, Councilmember Wilson. Clerk, call the roll.
Councilmember Gordo,
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy,
Yes.
Councilmember Madison,
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda,
Yes.
Councilmember McAustin,
Yes.
And then
Councilmember
Mike
Wilson,
and Daryl just sent me their stuff, so I'll have that.
Vice Mayor Hampton, Mayor Torner.
Yes.
The motion is approved without opposition.
All right. Thank you. That completes the consent calendar. And as I mentioned earlier, item 18 has been deleted from the agenda. Item 19, and Mr. Clerk, do we deal with 19 and 22 together?
That's correct, Mayor.
All right.
The motion to introduce the item or no?
Yeah, item 19 will be introduced by Matt Hawksworth.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, council members. Good afternoon. This is an item that the Finance Committee reviewed last Thursday. They approved it. The 3 members that were present approved it unanimously. We are bringing forward an item to refund certain water bonds and then issue $25 million in new bond proceeds to be paid back by future water fund revenues. And Vic Erganian is here present and can give a full presentation if that's the wish of the council.
Council members, this is a big ticket item. Half of it is to refi old BABS bonds at a much more favorable rate. And the other 25 million is new money to finance additional water improvements. Do you have any questions about this? You've got extensive materials on this. Are there questions? Are there any particular things that you'd like Vic or Water and Power to address?
We had an extensive presentation at Finance. I'm prepared to move the matter.
Thank you, Mr. Gordo. Is there a
I
second?
did have a question about the Sheldon Reservoir.
Please. Mr. Hampton.
My question is, where do we stand with that project?
Mr. Bawa from Water and Power will come up and answer that.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Good afternoon.
While we're waiting, is there a second on that motion?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. McAustin.
Good afternoon, Vice Mayor. When you say Sheldon Reservoir, with respect to the landscaping or something else?
No, I was talking about the reclaimed water.
Oh, the reclaimed water. You mean the Glendale's recycled water project?
Is that what it was called originally?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay. So that project is on hold for now. The permit that the Glendale had applied for is approved conditionally. And so Pasadena is in negotiations with City of LA, Department of Water and Power, which is also a stakeholder. They were a stakeholder in the proceedings for the permit in Glendale. And we're trying to find some better way to utilize that water. So this particular project, which we had originally discussed in public meetings, is on hold for now. None of this money is going to go towards that project.
Okay, that was it. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Are there any other questions with regard to this bond financing? Mr. Wilson.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I know it's $50 million bond and it's 25 of each. It's a single offering of 50 million, that the fact that we're using it to repay and refund and then do other projects doesn't mean they're two separate issuances or a single issuance. Is that correct?
Yes, it is one single issuance.
Thank you.
All right, we have a motion and a second.
For item 19. Yep.
Sorry.
Right,
Yeah.
this is for item 19, and then we'll do another, we'll need someone to offer the first reading of the ordinance once I read it.
Very good. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Councilmember Gordo?
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy?
Yes.
Councilmember Madison?
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda?
Yes.
Councilmember McAustin,
Yes.
Councilmember Wilson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hampton,
Yes.
Mayor Tornick.
Yes.
The motion is approved without opposition. That
I'd
will bring
offer
us,
the first reading.
so offered.
Okay.
This is an ordinance of the City of Pasadena authorizing the issuance by the city of not to exceed $50,425,000 aggregate principal amount of City of Pasadena water revenue / refunding bonds 2020A series payable out of the water fund and approving the execution and delivery of a sixth supplement to a water revenue bond indenture and a continuing disclosure agreement in connection therewith. It was offered by Councilmember Kennedy. Councilmember Gordo?
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy?
Yes.
Councilmember Madison?
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda?
Yes.
Councilmember McAustin?
Yes.
Councilmember Wilson?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hampton?
Yes.
Mayor Tornick?
Yes.
First reading of the ordinance has been conducted.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Vic. Thank you, Gertron. We'll now move to item 20, the Regional Housing Needs Assessment. I think Mr. Reyes is going to introduce this item.
That's correct, Mayor. And I would only note that we have about 14 to 15 public comments to read on this item.
Thank you. Duly noted.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. We did present this item to the Legislative Policy Committee and tonight, and also to the city's Planning Commission last week. And tonight we have Ms. Arlene Grandosen-Jones to give a presentation to the full City Council. And then we will obviously be here for questions and answers.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of the City Council. As you know, every 8 years, all California cities and counties are required to demonstrate adequate land use and zoning capacity for their share of existing and future regional housing needs, determined through the process known as the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, also known as RHNA. The Southern California Association of Governments, the Regional Council of Governments, leads this process. Starting in August 2019, SCAG presented different options for the draft RHNA methodology, which allocates, the overall regional housing determination of approximately 1.3 million new housing units to the region's 197 local jurisdictions. The proposed RHNA methodology was subsequently approved by the California State Housing and Community Development Department, also known as HCD, in January 2020, and adopted by the SCAG Regional Council on March 5th, 2020. Most recently, the SCAG Regional Council adopted the draft RHNA allocation plan on September 3rd, 2020. SCAG's adopted final RHNA methodology utilizes three main factors to allocate the regional housing need to local jurisdictions. Projected household growth, which is based on input from local jurisdictions and SCAG's growth forecast projections. Job accessibility, which is based on a jurisdiction's share of the region's jobs that can be accessed within a 30-minute driving commute. Essentially, jurisdictions with limited accessibility to jobs will receive a smaller RHNA based on this component. And transit accessibility, based on a jurisdiction's share of the region's population within existing and future high-quality transit areas identified in the Regional Transportation Plan. Next slide, please. Now, under SCAG's approved final RHNA methodology, Pasadena's RHNA is approximately 9,400 new dwelling units. This includes 2,700 very low income, 1,600 low income, about 1,500 moderate income, and about 3,400 above moderate income units. Next slide, please. Now, per state days of receipt of the draft RHNA allocation, local jurisdictions may file an appeal. The RHNA appeals period begins on September 11th, 2020, and it ends on October 26th, 2020. After the appeals filing period ends, a 45-day comment period begins, during which local jurisdictions and HCD may comment on filed appeals. Following the comment period, SCAG has a 30-day period to hold public hearings before the RENA Appeals Board. SCAG anticipates that hearings will take place in late December and early to mid-January 2021, depending on the amount of appeals that they receive. Next slide. Now, appeals may be filed on any draft RENA allocation within the SCAG region by any SCAG jurisdiction and HCD. Whereas in previous RENA cycles, only the subject jurisdiction could file an appeal on their own draft RENA allocation, new state legislation now allows other jurisdictions and the state to file an appeal on any city or county within the region. Next slide, please. Now, an appeal may be filed on at least one of the following reasons: that SCAG failed to consider information previously submitted by the local jurisdiction relating to certain local factors, which can include existing and projected jobs in housing and the available opportunities and constraints to development of housing in the jurisdiction. The SCAG failed to determine the jurisdiction's share of the regional housing need in accordance with the final RENA methodology, and that significant and unforeseen changes in circumstance had occurred in the jurisdiction after April 30th, 2019, and merits a revision of the information that the city previously submitted to SCAG. Appeals on this basis can only be made by the jurisdiction or jurisdictions where that change in circumstance has occurred. Next slide, please. Additionally, in accordance with state housing law, an appeal cannot be granted based on the following factors: a local jurisdiction's existing zoning ordinance and land use restrictions, including any local ordinance, policy, voter-approved measure, or standards limiting residential development, prior underproduction of housing in the jurisdiction from the previous regional housing needs allocation, and stable population numbers. Next slide. Now, the RENA Appeals public hearing will be conducted by SCAG's RENA subcommittee, which will serve as the RENA Appeals Board. The hearing will follow this general process. Applicants who have filed an appeal for a particular jurisdiction will have an opportunity to present their request and reasons to grant the appeal. After initial arguments are presented, SCAG staff will present their recommendation to approve or deny the appeals filed for the subject jurisdiction. Applicants in the jurisdiction who did not file an appeal but is subject of the appeal may elect to provide a rebuttal, but are limited to the arguments and evidence presented in the staff response. After arguments and rebuttals are presented, the RENA Appeals Board may ask questions of applicants, the subject jurisdiction if they're present, and SCAG staff. The RENA Appeals Board will issue a written final determination on all filed appeals after the conclusion of the public hearing. Next slide, please. In accordance with existing law, after the conclusion of the appeals process, SCAG will total the successfully appealed housing needs allocation. If the adjustments total 7% or less of the regional housing need, SCAG will distribute the adjustments proportionally to all jurisdictions. If the adjustments total more than 7% of the regional housing need, existing law requires that SCAG develop a methodology to distribute the amount greater than 7% to local governments. Now, all appeal decisions are final, and a reallocation of units cannot be appealed. Next slide, please. SCAG anticipates issuing the final draft RENA allocation plan in February 2021. Thereafter, local housing element updates are due to HCD by October 2021. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Reyes, do you have any other general comments before we open it to the council for the questions on the presentation?
Mayor, thank you. I think both the Legislative Policy Subcommittee as well as the Planning Commission expressed a lot of concern over the number. The last cycle being 1,300, this new cycle at 9,400 units. On the planning side and the requirements from SCAG, we need to plan for those units. It's extremely unlikely that we would ever produce that number of units. The last cycle, actually the last two cycles, the city of Pasadena has not met the RENA allocation. And I would note that only 29 cities currently are, as of July, are in compliance with their existing RENA allocation, and well over 300 are struggling at a very, very high level, such that they are subject to some permit streamlining under SB 35. So the numbers in my mind are somewhat pie in the sky. The challenge that I think that we have here is that the growth that we're going to see in the city of Pasadena is going to continue to be driven by our development caps that are in place and are established, as well as the economic factors that that sort of control the development cycle. But there has been a lot of concern over not only the high number, but sort of the continued loss of local control discussion that happens. And so therefore the Planning Commission did recommend that staff recommend to the City Council that we file an appeal. The way the appeal system is set up this year, I think is very challenging because the basis is extremely limited. I think that the appeal is also somewhat of a zero-sum game in that if we file an appeal and are successful, it gets reallocated back to other jurisdictions. But if another jurisdiction also files an appeal, their numbers that get reduced get reallocated back to us. And so I think that because of this and the way the system's set up, it's unlikely to me that SCAG will be granting that many appeals. Nevertheless, the option exists for us to file an appeal to send that message. But I don't think that we should hold hope that we are going to have an appeal that's granted. I do think that we will put our best foot forward if that's council's direction, file the best appeal that we can. But we need to continue forward with the housing element process, which is the subject of the next item, Mayor, in terms of the required housing element that's required by the state. And part of that is having planning for the RENA that's been allotted to us.
Mr. Reyes, before I open this up to all my colleagues, just go back a step. The SCAG number, the SCAG regional determination of 1,300,000 units over the next planning cycle, the 8-year cycle. SCAG's original number was much lower, isn't that right?
That's correct, Mayor. Initially 540,000. And then after some deliberation and consultation with SCAG, had finally proposed 2 different alternatives, one being 800,000 and one being 900. And we still got the 1.3 million, which far exceeds the SoCal Connect, which is the sustainable, the SCAG's regional growth plan for our region. So that was a challenge for the entire region. The 1.3 million number, much higher than anybody anticipated or thought was realistic.
Now that number, which is the source of all these other, as you said, pie in the sky allocations, that number is not the subject of this appeal process, right?
That is correct. There's an ongoing, Mayor, if I may, there's an ongoing discussion with SCAG and other jurisdictions about potentially litigating that number, and it's in infancy in terms of discussions, but that's not what the RENA process is about. The RENA process is strictly about the 9,400 units.
But the 1.3 million that was imposed on the SCAG region, the multi-county region, came from the State Department of Housing and Community Development?
That's correct, Mayor.
And that process, I just want to reiterate, because the numbers, I mean, what happens is once the sort of baseline number is created, everything just sort of mechanically flows from that. But that is not what the appeal process that we're talking about now is about.
That's correct.
Okay, Mr. Gordo had his hand up first.
David, what do you see as the interplay between item 20 and 21? I mean, I agree with you that we have to proceed with the housing element, but you know, obviously there's some interplay here. How do you view the two?
Yeah. Thank you, Councilmember Gordo. Well, given what state law is with respect to housing elements in general, and then all the new requirements this sixth cycle, it'll be extremely imperative that we get the best consultant on board. And we're very lucky under the next item to hopefully be having Ms. Veronica Tam be part of our team, who's probably one of the best in the state's been doing it since the beginning. And I do think that if the council's direction is to file an appeal, that we would probably look to use them as well as our council to help formulate that appeal. So when we get there, if the time's right, we may need to look at adjusting that contract a little bit. It is mostly from funding by the state. So this is not funds that are coming out of the general fund or other funds. There may be a little bit of overlap with our building fund, but the majority of the next contract is certainly with a grant from the state. But this housing element, Councilmember Gordo, is going to be a challenge. I think that there's a lot of challenge right now with planning projects in general because of the outreach that we normally like to see in Pasadena, the in-person meetings, the open houses, the sort of one-on-one discussions. The COVID has really made it challenging. And the state, I'm hopeful that they'll give all cities in California a bit of an extension on this, but they've not budged so far. And so we need to be diligent about moving forward.
That's precisely why I asked the question is I do think there's interplay, and I'm glad you're thinking in that direction. We should use the consultant who's helping us develop the in item 21, should we go forward with that, as I hope we do, we should use that same consultant to advise us and to develop an appeal. I don't disagree that the RENA appeal that's before us is a question of appealing the allocation. But many cities, large cities like Los Angeles and other cities in our region, in the San Gabriel Valley, are considering an appeal, and I think we ought to consider the same thing. The allocation is unfair, it's unachievable, and I don't think we should just go along with it without joining forces with others to file an appeal. But then there's a question of the overall number, as Mayor Tornick points out, has caused the cascade. That's another area where we should join forces with like-minded cities and consider litigation there. Because again, these numbers are not only not achievable, but the encroachment into local control is terribly unfair. When we are treated as a city the same way as other jurisdictions that maybe haven't done their part, it's unfair. I don't think we're going to convince Sacramento or the governor or HCD or anyone else that they completely got it wrong and should reverse course. But I do think there's room to convince them that there ought to be a different approach, an approach that recognizes cities like Pasadena who are doing their part, who are making an effort to construct affordable housing and other type of housing. And this approach that we have before us simply fails to recognize cities like Pasadena that have done their part. But we aren't going to go at it alone, colleagues. I'm going to say it again. We need to rejoin the San Gabriel Valley Council of Governments. We need to work with the cities around us. And we need to be partners with the cities around us. Otherwise, every community, including Pasadena, is going to continue to be treated unfairly with these numbers that just seem to surface go from 500,000 to over 1 million overnight. And so I'm going to suggest that we look closely at the appeal, that we use the consultant, and that we reconsider rejoining the San Gabriel Valley Council of Governments to have our voice heard. We are one of 31 cities in the region, and we are the only city that does not belong to the San Gabriel Valley Council of Governments. and we need to reconsider that. And this is the example of why.
Thank you, Mr. Gordo. I think Mr. Masuda was up next, and then Councilmember McAustin.
Thank you, Mayor. Colleagues, you know, I sit on the Legislative Policy Committee with Mayor Tornick and Councilmember Madison, and we hear the consultants from Sacramento all the time talking about these bills, these housing bills, and it's so unreal. These RENA numbers are unrealistic and unattainable. But I have a question for you, Mr. Reyes. Recently, President Trump has said that he rescinded the affirmatively furthering fair housing, that the AFFH rule of 2015. And he said he'll keep low-income housing out of suburbs and protecting neighborhoods. How does that help us?
I think that as a city, we need to recognize that, and I think that we do recognize that there is a statewide housing crisis. And I think that we, as some council members have alluded to here, have done a lot. I think that there's always more to do. I think that with respect to affordable housing, we've been leaders in the region, if not the state. We have a 20% inclusionary that's citywide. I think that the challenge for us will be to continue to allow growth to happen. First of all, it is important and imperative that we continue to do everything we can to protect our single family neighborhoods. But at the same time, it's important that we continue the city's planning legacy that started many, many years ago about the balance of protecting single family neighborhoods and allowing growth to happen in commercial corridors, allowing growth to happen in the central district and in areas like our specific plans. And that's, as we update our specific plans, you know, we want to keep in mind that we want to be consistent with the general plan. But at the same time, this concept of, you know, the suburbs and what's happening there and the loss of single family zoning, I think is more real than ever in some respects. We've seen ADUs and ADU legislation, that's the accessory dwelling units, be allowed at the statewide level. SB 1120 would have allowed up to maybe 4 units on a lot, and that basically passed both houses. But absent some snafu of scheduling, that bill would be on the governor's desk. And I think that it's going to come back next year. So we need to keep in mind that that's out there. And so at the local level, I think it's very important that we continue the balance so that we can say to everybody, we don't like certain things, but we are doing other things to ensure housing for all. Housing opportunities at every income level is extremely important. And our specific plan process, our policies regarding inclusionary housing and where we grow with respect to multifamily units is basically one planning legacy that Pasadena has, I would say probably pioneered in the region, and we want to continue.
Well, we have to remind ourselves, we're not the developers, we're the city. So we don't have a lot of control over all those units all the time. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Councilmember McAustin, followed by Councilmember Wilson. And then.
Mayor, actually, I think Andy was in line ahead of me.
Oh, okay, fine. Thank you. I'm having a little difficulty.
Yeah.